Hello and welcome to the Guy Shrink Podcast, a bi-weekly show of no-nonsense, thought-provoking ideas and down-to-earth coaching for life. I'm Bill Roman, your host here, and we're recording in Cogito Studios in Toledo, Ohio. Yes, the Glass City. In every episode, my guest and I will discuss the stuff that might keep a guy awake at night. You know, ideas, regrets, feelings, fears, and the self-talk that always goes with them. We're going to discuss relationships and family and working careers, friendships, staying the course, leisure time, sports, life philosophy, and many other pertinent ideas worth considering. We all have these ideas rolling around in our heads. My day job is being a licensed counselor and therapist, and most of my practice is working with men who are trying to figure out life's big questions and little annoyances. These conversations, however, are not to be considered clinical advice. That's just not the appropriate format on a podcast. But if you think you might need some guidance in that direction, there's a lot of qualified clinicians out there who can give you just that. I invite you to discover Guy Shrink as a kick-ass practical show in the regular lineup of podcasts you listen to. And I'd love for you to drop me a line at bill@guyshrink.com with your questions or comments. Please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and give us a like and subscribe on YouTube. Thanks for listening. Welcome aboard. Keep moving. And remember, you're not dead, so you can't quit. Welcome to Guy Shrink. I'm Bill Roman, host here, and we are in the beautiful downtown city of Toledo. Well, we're really not downtown, now we're in the burbs. The Glass City, and I'm here with a really good friend, Josh Bowen, who's the principal and co-owner of a large real estate firm here in Toledo and property management group. We used to be neighbors, and so he had to put up with me for a couple of years.
Oh, I didn't have to put up with you.
we would talk about what we're going to grill tonight. We would spend a lot of time talking about what we were going to grill or what kind of cigar we're going to smoke, kind of thing. So, Josh, it's just an absolute pleasure and honor to have you here. And so I begin every conversation that I have with my guests on what keeps a guy awake at night. So what might keep you awake at night, or what kind of thoughts roll around in your head in the middle of the night?
Well, thank you for allowing me to be here first. That's an interesting question. And we had talked before, and there's so many things that can keep a person up at night, whether you're thinking about family, whether you're thinking about work, future finances, current finances. And it was actually pretty hard for me to pinpoint that answer because it depends on the day, the situation, the time, what's going on. And last night I was laying there in bed, preparing for today. And I think that the one underlying component that I think most often about that really interrupts sleep is, are we doing the right thing? And it's not from, whether something's right or wrong. That's not what it is. It's really, is there the correct focus? That's really what that thought is. And in that, I guess what I'm meaning by that is what I've experienced, whether it be a relationship, whether it be business, whether it be your children, whether it be, your car, whatever that is, when you select something to focus on, and you really are just putting everything in it, especially as a business owner and owner-operator, and you're just really, I mean, every ounce of what you are is in that organization and serving those people. The focus that you put there allows a very narrow view. And then there's all of these things on the periphery, because we as human beings, even though we like to say we can all multitask, that's very difficult. I've got all kinds of pieces of paper and notes on my desk all the time, but you can only really focus fully on one thing at a time. And so we create this oscillating effect. We oscillate between one thing and another thing and another thing. And there's always a component, I think, inside of me that feels, if I'm focusing on this thing, I am giving it my best effort. I'm really, really ensuring that that part is very well done. And that part is normally very well done. And then what eventually happens is all of those things that are on the periphery that you would like to focus on, that you're not fully giving your attention to, those are the things that start to have challenges. And so I can say that is the number one thing that keeps me up at night, is where am I applying my correct focus? And is it the correct focus for right now?
Okay, you were talking about, I love that, the right thing, the correct focus. What might be some of the elements, so to speak? What are like 2 or 3 things one does to do the right thing? How about this for a minute? Let's talk about business. I mean, you're
Sure.
You got a large company here in town, and I'm sure that keeps you awake at night.
Always.
Thinking about that, and what's the correct focus, and what might be some of the things that guide you in having the correct focus in your business? Because we've talked about, you have a large clientele and more than just customers and whatever. So could you say a few more words about what are some of the things that go into ingredients of right focus?
So, for our focus, we regularly talk in the office that we don't just have one client, right? We do property management. We do property management for others. We're a licensed real estate brokerage. I'm a principal broker, as well as the other owner, Andrew. He's a principal broker. So we're constantly doing items and completing tasks in the stead of another individual that is not fully operating their business. We're operating their business, right? So we have 3 clients. We have our main client, which is our owner, the property owner. We have a secondary client, which is the resident that lives in the property. And then we have the community. So we're constantly balancing and weighing decisions to ensure that we're upholding our responsibility with our owner client, right? We have a certain list of fiduciary duties, right? Like loyalty and accountability and obedience. And, there's fiduciary duties that we owe to these clients. We also have a responsibility to the resident to ensure that, they're living in safe, durable, clean homes, that they're well kept and in good condition, and that, we're addressing concerns in a manner that, you have to balance. If I have a resident that says, I no longer like the paint color in my home, but there's really no problem with the paint, it's just a personal preference, are we going to go back to the owner and be like, well, the resident doesn't like the paint color, I need your approval to paint? That sort of thing doesn't make sense. However, if the resident says that, I have plaster walls that are starting to fail, then that's a safety concern, right? We want to ensure that they're living in a safe, clean, durable property, and that they're able to enjoy their home. Not just them, but if they invite family, are they prideful of where they live? And then the community component, I think community is extremely important for everything that we do in real estate, right? We have property owners that come here, that they purchase homes in order to rent, because that is an asset for them. And we don't have any single client that is a Warren Buffett, right? These are all folks that are small business owners, school teachers, mechanics, whatever their walk of life is, doctors, attorneys. these properties that they own in these portfolios are components of typically retirement accounts. We have some folks that use this as supplemental retirement income or supplemental income just on a regular monthly basis. Some of it doesn't ever leave the account. They're using that to build over time for the eventuality of retirement. But they come here because of the community, right? They come here because of the product that is available that's not as readily available in other areas of the country. I mean, we have over 200 owner clients. I can count on one hand how many live actually in our Toledo area. All of the rest of them live on the East Coast, West Coast, or abroad. I mean, just the other day, Andrew was on the phone with a client in Cameroon. I was on the phone with a client in Australia. We had another client that we were speaking with that was in Singapore. So the community component in ensuring that we are setting a precedent for how we maintain properties and how we interact with the local municipalities, ensuring that we're following local regulations and that we are good stewards of, the resources that are available to us, and that we're good stewards to the professional relationships that we've made within those local organizations, whether it be, the mayor's office or whether it be the Department of Neighborhoods, the water department, and other organizations that are ancillary to those that provide assistance and other programs for our residents that our residents get benefit from. Case in point, I think it's next week, the 10th, we have an in-house, I call it a clinic, where we have another organization called Pathway that provides rental assistance programs and other assistance programs to residents. They're taking residents in our office, and our office is open for anyone, not just our residents, but anyone that wants to come in and apply or have assistance with rental help or utility help or whatever that is. And we did that last September with the City of Toledo Rental Assistance Program also. And our office sits in a pretty strategic location on Burdan. It's very close to the bus line. It's very easy to get to. We have parking. They were previously holding some of these things last year, like at some of the libraries, like the downtown library was a popular one. And one of the things that we heard from some of our residents was, well, it's hard to get there. We can get to your office, but sometimes it takes us 1 or 2 buses in order to get downtown to that location. And if we do drive, we can never find a place to park, and parking's expensive. So really, from the first question, where do you place your focus, right? We've got 3 clients, and then we have our team, all of the folks that work for us and with us inside of our organization that help support that and their families. So, wow. When you sit and
talking about a lot of people.
Absolutely, when you sit and you think about this, not only are our owner clients, and then our residents, and then the families of the folks that we support internally, I mean, you're talking close to 8,000 people.
Oh my goodness, that's a small town.
That all of this affects. Yeah. And, I think about that a lot, especially when we're creating, a policy or we have an issue or there's some challenging situation that arises and we have to make decisions. We're always thinking, how does this decision set a precedent for other decisions? Are we following fair housing policy? Are we following real estate policy? Are we withholding and doing everything that we can to maintain our fiduciary duty to our owner, as well as those other commitments to the resident and the community? So, and then there's just standard operating stuff that goes on. I mean, like any company, any business, There's human resources issues and interpersonal issues. Somebody didn't show up to work one day. Somebody else is sick. A family member sick. Whatever those various issues are, right? So, when you're operating with 30 employees and you've got all of that stuff going on, and some days can be more stressful than others, especially when you're dealing with, we're dealing with a pretty intimate component of people's lives. We're dealing with the homes that they live in, right? So it's natural that, some of our folks, when something goes wrong, we know about it for sure. And how do we deal with that? How do we de-escalate that? How do we ensure that, we're coming together and we're really serving those clients to the best of our ability? And especially for our owners, ensuring that they have the information when they need to have the information. And a lot of times, we're reaching out. Part of my job, I say a lot in the office is, I get to be the bearer of bad news. And that's not an easy role to have. Most of our owners, if everything's going well, they don't hear from us. They get their monthly owner's report. They get their monthly deposit. They do what they need to do. It's typically they're hearing from us because something has gone wrong. And I need to report it, and we need to figure it out. And, the worst thing to do in any of those situations is, try to avoid it or sugarcoat it or, give an unrealistic picture of what is happening. I fully believe in realism. Like you just have to be real with people. Yeah. And
that means conflict.
And sometimes you're telling them things that they don't want to hear, sure. But you have to tell them anyway.
I'm intrigued and thoroughly admiring what I'm calling from you principled leadership here, because what I'm hearing is we have several clients. We got renters, and we've got the people that own the property. Plus, we have a community. And just thinking in terms of you're making decisions about a piece of real estate in terms of how's this going to affect the community in which it's located and the people that are there. And then I've heard you talk about duty and responsibilities kind of being the guardrails of how that works. And then I heard you say, I'm kind of the mayor of a small city. Yeah. 8,000 plus people that are affected sure. by what's going on here. I don't remember, but Peter Drucker or somebody said, when managers do things right, but leaders do the right thing. And our conversation right now is kind of centered on doing the correct focus or doing the right thing. That's what I'm hearing you say is this is the stuff that helps me make the right kind of decision. I have to take into all these factors, variables, and weigh them as opposed to what the bottom line is money, or the bottom line is I got to have this property cleaned up or whatever. So you're talking about principled leadership, guides. And we talked earlier about some of those ideas for you was just treat people as human beings.
Absolutely.
Some kind of your, what goes into my principles of leadership. That's treat people like human beings. I think you also said be direct. You said honesty. Mm-hmm. I'm sometimes a bearer of bad news per se. Just being totally honest about what's happening as opposed to sugarcoating it. Avoiding conflict is not a helpful thing. That's another whole topic from some time. Let's just talk about how to have a fight, how to have effective fighting.
So there was a lawyer, Jerry Spence, and he wrote a book. It's called How to Argue and Win Every Time. Okay. And one of the components of that book, it goes through this book, and it's an interesting format because it describes the lock, like what's holding you back, and then the key. So throughout the book, it constantly refers to what's the lock and what's the key. And one of the principles in that how to argue and win every time, which is really understanding that, in which is going to lead me into this other item, but really how to understand that you're not going to win every time.
That's right.
You can pose an argument, but you also have to say to yourself that it's okay if I don't win. In that, I'm still winning.
Yes, that's right. Oh, no, that really is. That's a very positive place to be. My model of conflict often gets me into problems. As you're talking here, I'm like, man, I'm making my head swim here to be the Burgermeister here. What do you do to manage you while you're managing all this?
Quiet. You know, some people like to play music in the background or have like a little TV running, news feed, whatever it is. We actually allow folks in the office, like when they're sitting there, they're doing work or whatever, they can put their headphones in. I see people streaming movies on their phone that just play in the background as they're working. I deal with what I feel is a lot of noise, right? There's noise. And that's not bad. That doesn't have a negative connotation. It's just there's all of these bits of information that are coming at me all the time from all of these various areas. And, you know, to filter all of that, to pick out the parts that matter at this moment, to take the parts that, hey, we need to look at that later on, we need to note that, and to use the discernment to when to take action as opposed to when to let the process just happen, right? And so how do I deal with that? I deal with that with quiet. When I'm driving in the car, I don't listen to music. I just like to immerse myself in thought. I'm able to sort things out. Typically when I'm sitting in my office, certain days it's a revolving door. People want to come in and sit and talk to me and talk through an issue and something to report, something that needs a decision on, that they're having a struggle making a decision. And I think it's really important that people are empowered to make decisions within their job function, within a framework, right? So communicating what that framework is and really giving up authority in that role to them so that they can make decisions, but understanding also that at times those decisions are challenging and they need upward support. And so being available when those folks need that support and helping them talk through that. And one of the things that I've always tried to do in any role that I've had was ensure that I'm just not giving someone the quick answer. And then they go away, they flutter off, and then they do their thing. Because that doesn't help anybody. Sometimes you need the quick answer. Like if there's a client standing there, right? You need a yes or no. Go, move forward, stop, don't do anything, right? But in other times, you know, you need to teach that individual how to navigate that situation because they will most likely have to navigate a similar situation sometime in the future. And if you're constantly feeding someone yes or no responses, stop or go responses, and then they just take an action on it without understanding the why of what you're doing behind that, and I'm talking with my hands and hitting the microphone now, they'll never learn. Yeah. They will never be able to grow and progress into, you know, a more structured and competent leader.
Sometimes leaders overfunction.
Sure.
Which then lets the other person become an underfunctioner. And what you're really saying is you're incompetent without me. even though that's not what we really want to do, but that's what we end up doing. And so we're not training anybody to think.
And that's a failure.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, and some leaders like it that way. They like that they're the only decision makers, because either A, they just like the power, or B, they don't think anyone can make a decision like them. And for some businesses, that's okay. It works. But when I'm dealing with all of the folks that make up our organization, and when I've dealt with other folks in other organizations where I've been in management, I look at how does this impact this person individually? Okay. Are they able to take what they learn here and use that to grow and progress in whatever it is that they want to do later in life? I worked for a banking company, and I can tell you that I had some really good mentors in that company. One of them, his name is Michael White. He worked there. Another one is Ann Healy. And they really taught me that one of the superpowers of a good leader is encouraging and building up the people around them to do better, to be promoted, and understanding that the current position that you are in is probably not the position that you will end up with. You cannot expect a bank teller to be a bank teller for the next 30 years. But if you expect them that you're a bank teller now, but your end goal is to be a branch manager, you're going to run one of these branches one day. And this is our goal. And all 7 of you standing around are going to run one of these branches someday. Whether you choose a year or 3 years down the road that's not what you want to do with your life and you want to go do something else, we're still involved in the training process to ensure that you are equipped with what you need to do to be the leader and make the decisions. Whether you're the bank teller now or the branch manager now, we're working through that process.
So other people's success is a hallmark of one's leadership.
Absolutely.
That working towards that. Now, I don't think you can get to that place of having that as a principle unless you're quiet for a while. I mean, I love what you said about silence in the car or whatever. How do you do self-management? And you said it's just being quiet and just being thoughtful. And there's a Christian philosopher named Dallas Willard talked one time about, he called it solitude and silence were the 2 most necessary, he called them spiritual disciplines needed today. And somebody asked him, well, why would I want to do that? And he said, well, to see if there's anything to you. I'm like, whoa, solitude and silence, to see if there's anything to you. And only when we're quiet, like you said, turning off the distractions, can we actually be thoughtful and get down to what are my principles of engagement in the world. This morning at the gym, I was telling Keegan a minute ago that I was listening to this podcast, The Art of Manliness, which is a fabulous podcast with Brett McKay, and he was interviewing, and the guy said, what shows up when you show up?
That's profound.
Isn't it? And I think that's what you're getting at here about your principled leadership, and that is rooted in silence, because we talked about self-management. And if you're not managing yourself, good luck.
And part of that silence, yes, it's silence. I like quiet, but it really is, it's a pointed reflection, self-reflection, and really being able to listen to the multiple parts of my brain talking at the same time. And it goes back to, what keeps me up at night? What keeps me up at night is what should I be focusing on? What is the right thing right now? And is the attention that I'm giving to this thing, is it helping, or is it providing oxygen to the fire, right? And the best way to deal with something that's burning is what? Put it in a vacuum. Sometimes things need the vacuum.
Right.
You know, when you are upset, when you have a client that's upset, you know, I've dealt with multiple clients on the phone. You know, people get upset over things. There's triggers that people have. One of the things that I like to talk about in the office and that we deal with regularly is you have to, there's two components. There's the event and then there's the emotion that's tied to the event.
Oh, that's so true, Josh.
And you have to be able to separate those two things. And you have to understand that this client is upset about an event. I just told him that his roof is failing and it's $15,000 to replace the roof. He is upset. That is a trigger. He's absolutely within his rights to be upset, but I don't have to be upset. I don't have to have any emotional component to his upsetness. They're separate. And understanding the focus at times when you're on that call and you deliver that information and you get to deal with that emotional release from that event, what is best to treat it with? Silence, a vacuum, a pause. Instead of continuing to ramble out information that is probably going to feed that fire at the time, sometimes it's best just to let it calm for a moment. Just like the email, right? You never want to send an email when you just got pissed off about something.
No, okay,
right?
No.
But
Don't
it's
press send.
And one of the things that I've taught our folks to do is when you start formulating an email, never put the person that you intend to send it to in the subject line, or don't add their email address up there.
Yeah, don't put any ad
Don't
in.
no,
Right.
don't do
Just
it.
write.
Don't do it. Just write, and let it sit there. And if you still feel that way, have somebody else read it. However, get it all out. And probably tomorrow you're going to delete it.
We're talking to a guy shrink here with Josh Bowen, good friend, who's a principal and co-owner of a large real estate firm here in Toledo. And we've been talking about principled leadership, what keeps a guy awake at night, and he's the mayor of a small town kind of thing, because his business affects so many, almost 8,000 people. And we're just talking about when you have to be the bearer of bad news to maybe a client who owns a large piece of property and has put a new roof on, and you have to tell them that. And of course, then there's reactivity. Yeah. And talking about the important things about self-management is working with silence, and you just let the reactivity happen without you reacting to the reactivity. I just said, your anxiety's up when other people get anxious, and anxiety is contagious. And so instead of catching it from the upset client, you're just quiet and see what happens, as opposed to, you're right, people who talk too much are really anxious.
And that's what I said before. So, there's points where you can say, do I have to take action now? Do I have to continue moving forward? Or do I just stop here and allow the process to happen? And those types of conversations are exactly that, right? You have to deliver this piece of information. It's a piece of information. It's an event. They need to know about it. We need to make a decision to figure out what we're doing. But it's going to cause an emotional response, and you have to be cognizant of that. And you have to allow that emotional response to occur without that emotion being part of you and what you're doing in your decision-making process. Yeah, and that's hard.
Yeah, absolutely. But maybe a little principle to think about here is, as much as you and I are good buds and all that, I cannot allow Josh's emotionality to control mine.
Yeah.
This is tough, but I think that is the essence of I call differentiation of self. Being your own person without getting too muddied up with other people's stuff.
Well, and it's, we all have emotional triggers, right? But those emotional triggers are my problem. They're not somebody else's problem. And they shouldn't be someone else's problem. And that's also hard, right? That takes a lot of self-reflection to identify that. And it's the same thing in relationships. I mean, I've had a good number of relationships, a lot of them that have failed. I'm not proud of that. I'm open about it, but I'm not proud of it. But through that process of identifying where it is that I failed, a good portion of that was my reaction to things that reaction was misplaced in a good number of ways. And the feelings that I felt because of certain situations, I produced them myself. And I allowed myself to do that through a series of choices. Yeah. And one item that I think about quite often, and I've sat with other folks going through various parts of life, and we make choices every day. Most of the choices that we make are unconscious. They just happen. We just go through the motions, but we are constantly making small choices. And it's all of those small choices. It's all of those things that we don't even realize that they're happening that add up to create the big problems. They just continue to build. And the solution to that is developing awareness. You have to be able to develop awareness of what it is that you're doing. And, to me, that's part of Stoicism. So
I was going to say, you sure sound like a Stoic philosopher when you start talking like this way.
There's, you're familiar with a few of the books, and I subscribe to a daily email, and then there's podcasts, but it's called the Daily Stoic.
Yeah, Ryan Holiday.
Yes,
great stuff.
And I that has taught me so much. It really has taught me so much, and it has really taught me that whatever it is that's happening around me, it is 100% my choice on how I'm reacting. And what it is that I choose to pay attention to, and it's not paying attention, it is actually paying attention, right? You are funding that interaction.
I like that. Yeah, that's good.
And the more you fund the interaction, whether that be positive or negative, the larger it grows. So your choice on what it is that's important to you, where you spend your time, where you spend your money. Now there's this the movement of buying sustainable products at stores, buying organic, all of that stuff. Well, when you go to Kroger and you buy the milk that is produced with hormones or whatever it is that they put in there, rather than choosing to buy the milk that is organic without the hormones, you're making a choice and you are feeding into an engine. Now, I quite honestly don't care. I buy the milk in the gallon. It's fine. I drink it. But it's really those choices that we're all making, whether it's the milk or whether it's the the time that you talk on the phone to your mom, or the date night that you keep skipping because something else is more important. Whatever that thing is that you are feeding, you can lose out on positive relationship items, or you can reinforce it. Mm-hmm. You can lose out on positive business opportunities, or you can reinforce it. We can also reinforce the negative. We can also when your ex-girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, wife, whatever is texting you nasty things, rather than getting into the cycle of I have to text back, I have to perpetuate this, I need to have the last word. That's when the vacuum is very important.
Yes, absolutely. The silence, they just shut down.
I mean, if you don't feed it, then it's not an issue. You still might have issues that you need to deal with, yes.
Yeah.
But that process isn't healthy.
You're talking about the importance of making small choices. I mean, you're right. Viktor Frankl, amongst other people, said everything can be taken away from you except your ability to decide, make a decision about your response in every given situation. We have choices in everything that's out there. There's no such thing as, well, I didn't have a choice. Yeah, he had a gun to my head. You still had a choice, kind of thing. Well, small choices add up to habits, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And
Absolutely.
then habits add up to personality.
Sure. And character.
And character. Yeah. Yeah. Which is, that's a lifetime endeavor. A lifetime endeavor is building one's personality / and character. Well,
so
you didn't always used to be this way. I know that.
No.
I lived next door to you.
Well, and when I was younger, I've had a lot of good role models, but I've also had some poor role models, right? And part of those poor role models were members of my own family with drugs and alcohol. The propensity to self-diagnose and self-treat problems and issues with readily available substances, right? It's not a winning solution for anyone. It's not a winning solution for kids involved in that. It's not a winning solution for you yourself. It's not a winning solution for relationships in the long term. I can absolutely say that one of my relationships in particular, as a marriage with my two oldest children, I fully take responsibility for everything that happened there because I was self-treating my emotional pain with large amounts of alcohol quite consistently. And it really wasn't until I was pretty much at the bottom. I remember sitting on the kitchen floor with the bottle that I've almost half consumed on the phone at about 11 o'clock at night with a friend, and the friend said, you need to dump the bottle out and you need help. And that was actually the first time anyone said anything. And I wasn't mean, I wasn't abusive in any physical way, but I can definitely say that I was abusive emotionally, because anytime I experienced pain or what I considered to be pain, abandonment, it's always been a very strong component of avoiding abandonment. I would just turn my feelings off. I would be very cold and distant. I just stop talking to you. And I think looking now, there's all kinds of things that would go on in your head still, even now. When I encounter some challenging situations, there's all kinds of things that are going on in my head that I want to get out. most of them are not nice. But part of me now knows that I have to process that, and then I'm able to talk about it. At that point, 15 years ago, that was not the person I was. But that did lead me to, sit up in bed one spring morning. I remember the window was open and you could hear the birds outside, and it was spring, and I said, I need help. I can't do this anymore. And I started visits with a counselor and started into AA. And part of that was also that we are environmental beings. And really what that means is the environment that we choose to surround ourselves with and interact with and perpetuate can cause large emotional issues and strains on us as a being.
Yes, absolutely. That is so true, Josh.
And depression perpetuates those environmental issues. If you cannot work through depression, if you can't work through your own thoughts and your own emotions and those things that are taking place around you, well, guess what your house probably looks like?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I know that for large portions of time, I was 100% depressed. At one point, all that I thought about was everything would be okay if I just ended it right now. Everything would be okay. And I had thoughts of, well, I could do it this way. I could drive off the road here. It was very matter of fact. Very matter of fact. And that was a part of me that was so terrifying.
Absolutely.
And it's a part of you that once that starts, and it's like a little seed that's planted in there, it never goes away. It never goes away. It is still a component of who I am today. That I know that there's that little whisper. It's just a little whisper that's back there. That during times of really hard stress, it comes out and says, you know what? I've got a solution. You can do this right now. It's so easy. Look at that. But then you got to think about all the other stuff. It goes back to making choices. How many people does this affect? Absolutely. And is it healthy? No, it's not healthy. But, part of that experience and part of what allowed me to get through those experiences, I met a gentleman when I was working in a restaurant out near Philadelphia. And this guy, you could probably think he looked slightly homeless. But he came into the restaurant every day. When I met him, he was 96 years old. And I only know that because he told me. He was very proud of his 96 years old. He walked in. He was always hunched over, had some posture issues. He had one drooping eye. It was constantly leaking. He had a handkerchief that he was wiping it up with. He'd pull himself up. We had a little counter where you had seating. You could come eat lunch. And he'd pull him up on the stool, and he'd sit himself down, and he'd pick his head up, And we always had the same soups, but every day he came in, he'd ask, "What's the soup today?" He knew the answer. After a while, you know regular customers, and we talked about a lot of things. We talked about life and failure and regret, and we talked about family, and we talked about choices and decisions. And one day, we carried note cards in our pockets. We called it pocket memory. And constantly you're doing all of these things, and you have to remember something, and you jot it down and you put it back. And he knew that these note cards were there. He told me to pull out a note card, and he said, "I'm going to tell you a story." And he told me the story of his life. He told me that when he was about 4 years old, his parents lived in the Philadelphia area. They gave him up to his aunt who lived in California. They shipped him across the United States on a train by himself.
Wow, what an incredible journey.
Went to live with his aunt, was there for what he felt was about a year. And his aunt didn't want to take care of him anymore, and she shipped him to go live with his grandfather on a barge in the South China Sea. So imagine this little 6-year-old-ish boy, abandoned by his parents, abandoned by his aunt, now taking a long journey to go live with his grandfather, whom I assume at that point he had never met, to go live on a barge, a textile barge. His grandfather dealt in textiles. And he told me of just the acrid smell of what it was like to be there, and the smoke in the air, and the smell of the raw sewage, and the sea, the area where they were trading, and the people that his grandfather were dealing with. And how hard his life was, and how he really grew to hate his parents and grew to love his grandfather. In his teenage years, and sorry, this story is so personal to me, because I remember this guy sitting in this restaurant at the end of his life, and we were his only family at that point. So he told me when he was a teenager, he left and he went to London, and he did a bunch of things there. He learned how to be a pilot. Eventually, he went to the Royal College of London. He studied, I guess, psychiatry. Then, there were wars taking place. There was all kinds of stuff that was going on. He was involved in war, and eventually came back as a young man, moved back to the United States, moved back to the Philadelphia area. Set up a practice, and in his practice, he focused helping people with, it wasn't called PTSD at that time. I'm sure you know what it's called, but doesn't come to the top of my mind now. But that's what he was doing. Very successful. Opened up a school and a big clinic, and then met a woman, owned a florist shop, And both of them were in the same social circles, and they, from what he said, had a grand time, had a wonderful relationship, got married, never had any children. Apparently they couldn't have children. He said lots of practice, but never any kids. And that's something that he regretted, but just really had a good, full life with her. On their 25th wedding anniversary, he made reservations at their favorite restaurant. He was there, and she had to drive away in order to meet him. And, this is during a time there's no cell phones, so, nobody can really communicate, and he's there and he's waiting. And eventually he learns that she was killed in a car accident instantly on her way. So, really, you've got this whole part of his life that, everything stopped. And he just poured himself into his work and the clinic and patients. And eventually he met another woman. She was widowed. Her husband had passed, had a few kids. The kids were grown. And so they were also in the same social circles, ended up getting married. Really a close-knit family. He talked very favorably about the kids and, having grandchildren and all of the things, as he's going through later in life that he wanted to do. And he had this instant family almost. And they were married for a good number of years and had a wonderful life together. And then she came down with cancer. And when she died, the kids basically came in and took everything and left him as he appeared, homeless, cut off all contact. And so everything that he knew to be his family, and at that point his identity that he had created in his life, was gone. And so he came in every day for lunch, and we were his family. And so with the note card, he only had one promise for me. He said, if I tell you these things, you write down on the top of that note card words to live by. If I tell you these things, you have to promise that you're going to share. You have to share them. This is my entire life's work. And all that I ask is that you share. So obviously I made the promise. And so he said, okay, number 1 to 3. And the first one, he had a little story that goes with each one, but, the first one is trust but verify. And that's really, we're human beings. We're relational animals. We want to have a tribe. We want to have people that, we're part of something. And part of that want means that we have to trust. And we have to be able to place trust in others and in organizations. And but that trust but verify really means that you shouldn't place that trust blindly. You should really know what you're trusting in, who you're trusting in. And I thought that was really important because, he placed his trust in so many people that, especially early on in his life, where he placed his trust in his parents and his parents gave him away. Yeah. He placed his trust in his aunt and his aunt gave him away. Wow. Yeah. And abandonment, all kinds of stuff. And that doesn't mean you build walls and never take them down. I think that just means that there's a little caution there. Don't go join a cult. That's really, I think. And the next one, which so number 2 is a good run is always better than a bad stand, which is basically never get into a fight you can't win. And what is really interesting there is, human beings, in his words, we are the only creatures on this planet that will fight and die willingly for an idea, for a flag, for a piece of paper, for a creation of another human being. And in the animal kingdom, you don't see that. You see that animals, sure, that you'll have some animals that'll fight to the death over breeding rights and of a particular territory, but those are they're hardwired to reproduce, right? That's what they're doing. But in a story that he gave me, you have 2 raccoons, they meet in the woods and they start to scrap it out. A good majority of the time they're going to fight for a little while, but the smaller of the 2 raccoons is going to end up running away. They're not going to fight to the death because it's self-perpetuation. They want to survive. And I think that's also something that's really interesting is, never get into a fight you can't win is using discernment in understanding, being able to think forwardly and identify what could potentially be a fight before it even gets there.
Yes, indeed.
And number 3, which I think is the most important elements to this, keys, I call them, is when you're making a decision, always ask yourself, am I using good judgment? And, that word good, it's really interesting because it's it doesn't really mean good or bad. It really means, am I using sound judgment? Does this thing that I'm thinking about now that is sitting here with me, the decision that I'm making, does that decision affect all of these other things down the road, or is it just right now, in this moment? And the other part of that is, that taking a pause, that little bit of silence.
Yeah,
Let's you've got this thing that's happening to you or happening around you. And from the Stoic perspective is, your ability to separate yourself from that just for a moment and to evaluate it from a perspective of, am I affecting this situation, or is this a situation affecting me? And I thought that one was really, really profound. But, these 3 items that from all of his life, and I had a guy that was sitting in front of me, and this little note card is everything that he found important. And shortly after that conversation and that note card, I moved away and I moved back to Ohio, and I got a call where I was working, and they had let me know that we called him Doc. That's what he wanted to be called. They had let me know that Doc had passed away. It was a pretty hard day.
Yeah.
But
what a magnificent story that is, Josh. Wow. What's the soup? Well, the soup is those three words to live by, which have I can see they've had a profound effect upon you. There's no doubt
and
about
that's
that.
a lot of what has helped me through the various phases of my life. And I know that will still help me.
Yes.
Are contained in that little message.
Yes. Josh, that's just absolutely a fabulous story about that gentleman, and thank you for sharing that, and thank you for your your vulnerability and your courage to share about some of your personal history there of doing some struggling. And I was just thinking about as species, animal species that we are, we're kind of hardwired in our brain to embrace pleasure and run away from pain. And things like alcohol do both of those very nicely.
Oh, for sure.
And so I just want to say a shout out to our listeners. If any of you guys are struggling with alcohol or drugs or something as a way to embrace pleasure and run away from pain, and it's getting out of hand, get some help. There's lots of good stuff out there. Call a buddy who will be forthrightly honest with you. Check out AA. Seriously, it's a choice that you can make the life and death choice, and
it is.
And if you're struggling with depression, it's the same thing. So much of us think that, well, if I just drink, I'll feel better. But alcohol chemically is a depressant, and so why don't I feel any better? And so if you're struggling with any of those issues, welcome to the club, but get yourself some help.
It's the hole that keeps digging itself deeper.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not a good solution whatsoever. So we've been talking with a good friend, Josh Bowen, today about a lot of things, but about the correct focus and doing the right thing, and what keeps a guy awake at night. So Josh, just kind of wrap things up here. Do you have any one-liner? I call it an elevator speech here. One-liner that you want to give out to the guys and gals that are listening about how to manage yourself or whatever.
I think if there's anything that I can say concisely, whether you believe in a higher power or not, pray. Part of sitting in silence, part of meditation, whatever you might want to call it, part of self-reflection is, I think, at first being grateful for the gifts that we have, for the ability to make choices, for the ability to look around us and see all of what is really beautiful. There's really a lot of beauty in this world. And sometimes I think that the ugly overtakes that, and we focus on that. But just knowing that I believe that all of us are here for a purpose. Okay. That we were here for some reason, we came from somewhere, we're here for a reason, and we're going somewhere. I don't know where that somewhere is. But in times that you just need some sort of reassurance, to just pause and be grateful and just pray. Because in my life, it doesn't give you an immediate answer. I'm going to tell you that right now. If that's what you're looking for, it's the wrong path. But you'll find experience that'll take you to the answer.
That's really great advice. What a way to end a great conversation today. We've been talking to Josh Bowen, and just want to thank you and all of our listeners on Guy Shrink. Thanks for listening, and if this is helpful, tell a buddy, tell a friend, and keep listening. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill.